Welcome to the live stream. Sorry guys, I had to go off. My cat is really being a little turkey tonight. Anyway, I was actually, I don't know, at least 5 or 10 minutes into the live stream and we were discussing the plight of targeted individuals, and we were talking about awareness and talking about gang stalking or being a targeted individual. What kind of effects has that had on gang stalking? And it was neurodivergent that asked that question. We have two people back in the live stream. Sorry, guys, we're going to try and do this. I don't like being interrupted like that, and my little cat was being a turkey, and hopefully she won't do it again. And sometimes she does that. And she was asleep, and the next thing I know, she's getting into stuff, and yeah, she's a little active tonight. We'll just put it that way. But anyway, we were talking about, does it complicate things when targets discuss gang stalking? And it was kind of a personal question to me, and it does. Okay. It does complicate things. It depends on who you're telling. I mean, of course, I'm making videos for other targets, and there's nothing wrong with that. But does that really complicate the life of a target individual? Has it complicated things for me? It has. It absolutely has. Has it increased some of the things that have happened to me? It has. Okay. And I've had some pretty weird things happen. In fact, back in June of 2021, I considered stopping, any more videos. In fact, I erased around 300 videos from the channel, and I started over with scratch. I made one video, and I talked about the fact that I was really considering just throwing in the towel on this because of what happened. And I'm not even going to go into what happened, but it was intense, and it was mostly spiritual, and it was an encounter of sorts, and I didn't think it was worth it to keep doing it at that point. I've had a lot of things like that happen. Um, but when it comes to talking to other people about your experience, like I said earlier, if you're talking to another target and it's a legitimate target, an individual, well, it can be productive unless you disagree on something. But of course, as I was talking about before, you have two groups in society, and those are the people that do not know. And then you have the people who know, which is the scary part. Okay. And I mentioned that trying to figure out, just how many of them are there out there. Okay. It's a fair question for targeted individuals. And as I said, moving through your salient landscape as a targeted individual, if you're experiencing higher forms of harassment, you're going to be dealing with a lot of perps. Okay. And that's when you get into trying to explain the logistics of gang stalking, right? And that's where I move into the primarily spiritual realm, not negating technology or directed energy weapons or V2K or any of that. All that stuff is real. Absolutely. In fact, I've dealt with that kind of thing. Okay. I'm not going to, you can look at it however you want. Um, but uh, you know, there's a lot of them. Okay, and the complicated thing, that you're going to run into is you are being painted as crazy. Okay, the whole scenario that you were in is designed primarily to make you look nuts. Okay, so opening your mouth is always going to make it more complicated. Period. Okay, like I said, if you're talking to someone else who's experienced gang stalking, who's experienced harassment, well, that's one thing. Okay, but if you're talking to someone or around someone that has never experienced it, or for like me, the fact that that I'm making these videos public or whatever, well, that's you're taking a chance. And I've mentioned before that the fact that people have reached out to me and said that that I've helped them out and that they've received a benefit from my videos. Okay, makes it worth it to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about this stuff. I do not talk about this stuff in my life and in my interactions with other people ever. I would never wear a shirt that was trying to expose gang stalking. Okay, and that gets back to what I was talking about before. Why? Why wouldn't I do that? Okay, here we go. Because there are a lot of people out there who know about this. They are already laughing at us, man. Okay, I'm telling you, I've been doing this for decades, and I was talking about the fact that some of the things that I was going to talk about might be depressing. Okay, but I've been doing this for decades. I've seen the flavor of this in so many different ways you don't even want to know. Okay, and you get. I mean, on a heavy day of harassment, I mean, you're talking about a huge percentage of people that can be involved in your scenario and that are just going to be laughing at you. And they're not afraid. Okay, they are not afraid that they're going to get caught. They are not worried that the police are going to catch them. I mean, I've been playing this game for decades, guys, and you guys have all talked about this stuff. I've heard a lot of negative comments about, why even bother? In other words, I tell people get a security system, try to protect yourself as best you can, which is you have to. You don't want to make it easy, but for some reason they seem to get around a lot of these things, whether it's people getting in your house or getting away with harassing you at work or whatever, or, whatever. And they are not worried about this. All the way back to the beginning of it, I can't think of anybody who's ever been caught or even come close to experiencing really any negative repercussions for this stuff, other than the fact that I've seen it kind of fall back on them, and as far as their emotional energy or whatever. I've seen people get caught in a type of mental framing that kind of came back on them a little bit. But as far as justice, as far as people getting caught or whatever, they're not worried about it. And if you're looking, for some biblical answers on this, it's gang stalking is like a plague. Okay, you have to remember that right now the world is being controlled by principalities and powers, and there are certain afflictions out there. I believe gang stalking is one of those afflictions. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not putting it in a way where you have been selected, for destruction or anything like that. But you have, uh, you are a victim of this affliction, and it has gone out like a plague in the world. And the powers that be, who are temporarily ruling this planet, have put you in that place. You are in that part of this menagerie. Okay. And I've talked about, a lot of different reasons that people are targeted, and people wonder that why is this happening to me? And so on and so forth. Well, getting back to the individuals who know, okay, some people are following a social dynamic, and they really don't, they're not really on the inside of any of this stuff. Then there's other people that have more knowledge, that are going to be interacting with you in your gang stalking experience. And it's similar to when you get into the social dynamic of a scapegoat, when people do not comply, when they do not go into that herd mentality and follow the group or whatever, conform. There's going to be persecution. Okay, I've talked about targeted individuals can fill that space to where they are experiencing the wrath of the collective, and they are examples for those who would try to oppose the rulers of this world. Whether you're dealing with an occult or maybe some secret societies or just the people out there that know what's going on. And the fact of the matter is that Satan is ruling the planet right now. Remember the temptation of Jesus, right? All these kingdoms have been given to me, and I can give them to whoever I wish. And he asked him to bow down before him, and he would give it to him, right? I don't think that was idle talk, okay? And when you go into the account uh, after the flood, when mankind disobeyed again at the Tower of Babel, and God disinherited the nations and he handed the nations over to the principalities and powers. And there's a lot that goes into that. And I'm not going to really go into all that, but Satan has the world right now. Okay. He's been given those things. God is ultimately sovereign, but he's control of that. And when you're dealing with some of these people out there, and we talked about the demonic hive yesterday, they have chosen that way. Okay, some of these people, they're not following social dynamics. Some of them know what's going on. There's a great majority of individuals out there. In fact, when you look at this in a biblical perspective, or even as far as conformity, there are a lot of people who have chosen to do that. In fact, there are a lot of people in the targeted individual community who are probably perps, and they are watching, and they are, sowing disinformation and playing this game. They're everywhere. Okay. And they are not worried about getting caught. Okay. And we are those examples that if anybody just, well, if you want to go ahead and, try to oppose, go ahead. You want to be one of the crazies? Go right ahead. You know, you can wear a tinfoil hat, put a bunch of, tinfoil bubble wrap all around your room and, live like a targeted individual. And people are, I would imagine, and I've, experienced those things before. And you get the directed conversations and the innuendos. Well, I'm not going to end up like you know, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of people that know, and it's like a job for some of them. And I've heard targeted individuals mention the fact that some people will actually apologize to the target when or even right before they start harassing them. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Um, and it's either they do what they're supposed to do as far as their compliance to the collective, to you, or they deal with the wrath of the group. Okay, I'm going to see what's going on in the comments. So I've been going on about this. I want to see what's out there. Welcome to the live stream, Stephen. Glad to see you. Sorry about that neurodivergent. I'm trying to pick up where I left off. And, hopefully my little kitty will obey. She was a little turkey earlier. Let me see. What else do we got going on in here? On average, Joe, I've had legit supernatural experiences. Only in the world of the TIs do you see and encounter some of the supernatural experience. I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that. And that plays into what I'm talking about. And a lot of people would disagree. There's that belief out there. Everybody's hooked up to the supercomputer with DNA resonance frequency, and it explains how certain individuals in a whole group of people can be attacked. And like I said, I believe a lot of that is disinformation. I don't think for a minute that they have all that control. Because if they did, they wouldn't be playing these ridiculous games that they are. Everybody would be in line. Everybody would be wanting to buy an electric car. There wouldn't be any, divergent groups out there or whatever. If they really had all that, and not only that, but you get into other evidence that would be clearly obvious. Uh, you know, Archaeological evidence as well as fulfilled prophecy for the spiritual aspect of our existence, and this plays into it. But you're going to deal with that, and it's depressing. To me, I was thinking about that today, and I've gotten a lot of street theater and comments from people, and I've also witnessed individuals who've been involved in my harassment. And I mentioned that a little bit last night on the live stream that they're bebopping along in life. They don't seem to have any problems, and in fact, they're doing pretty well. You know, the exact opposite of what you'd expect, and that's really when you get into the axioms of this testing ground that you're in. One of them is just faith. And what is that? Well, you got to believe what God says in spite of what it looks like, because it looks like you've really chosen the wrong thing. If you're a believer, if you're a targeted individual, and I think a lot of people out there who say that they're targeted individuals and they don't believe in the spiritual stuff, I think some of those, a lot of them are lying. That's my personal opinion. And you get a lot of perps like that. I'm not saying that that the reason you're being targeted is because of that. It could play into it heavily, though. Um, but you have a lot of people out there who are playing that game, and they're like, "Yeah, you've lost, man. How's that working out for you?" You know, and it doesn't appear that it is working out. Okay, so the harsh reality for the targeted individual, and you have to get into the clear, biblical examples of the New Testament, is that the apostles, for example, they didn't have a lot of money. They were considered the scum of the earth. They were persecuted to death. The exact opposite of the prosperity gospel, the exact opposite of a lot of these ministries that are propped up out there, which there's an explanation for those things too, is that it's a testing ground. If God wanted to raise up a guru that had all the answers, what would happen? Well, you'd have a bunch of arrogant, snotty Christians who thought they knew everything, who were unregenerate, and there's no growth process involved. They have to be tested. They have to seek out the truth. They have to draw near to God themselves and make that conscious decision to learn these things and cultivate a relationship with Christ, and make that free decision. Hold on, the cat's going to start doing this again. I just know it. Oh, well, I'm going to let her run around a little bit. So you have that salient landscape that appears to be very contradictive when it comes to justice, when it comes to dealing with all these things. When targeted individuals are persecuted, you have to believe, in spite of what it looks like, that there is going to be justice one day, right? And you kind of have to let that go for now, because I don't think they're going to experience those negative repercussions. And just like, as far as the targeted individuals being outnumbered in society, I think that there are a lot of people that don't know about this stuff. There's a menagerie created by the spiritual dimension to obfuscate everything. But you have, um, if hold on a minute, the cat is really freaking out. You have a different, group of people. Hold on, get up there. My gosh, she's really going to drive me nuts tonight. And as far as the individuals who know about this stuff, there is a huge majority of people uh, who have sold out. Okay. I think that the smaller majority of people in society, as far as individuals who don't know and individuals who are targeted, we're the minority. Okay. And to me, after all I've experienced, it's obvious. And like when it comes to people harassing the target, and they're laughing and they're not worried about getting, they're not worried about any negative repercussions. They're not worried about being caught. They're laughing at us. Okay, plain and simple. That's going to end, but it might not end for a while. Okay, depending on how you look at that. And Anyway, let me go into the comments here. I've been dealing with the cat tonight, and she's kind of throwing me off kilter here. Okay, Techno Kid says that's true. Many know about these things. They do. Dave says the targeted individual will get the last laugh. I hope you're right, brother. Let's see here. Let's see what's going on out here in the comments. NC says, might as well be vocal about it to reach the people that don't know about it. Sure, people might call us crazy, but eventually everything will come out. I would agree with that. But, the question that I was getting to is you got to be, well, is it going to complicate things? Of course, you got to be careful about this. And it does seem contradictive because I'm doing live streams about it, and I'm making videos. I've got hundreds of videos about gang stalking. But like I said, I am doing it for the people out there who are suffering. I'm not trying to stand out on a street corner and get everybody to believe that there are targeted individuals. I would not waste my time doing that. And I think it would really complicate things. and you don't want to give people an occasion call you out, because this whole campaign of gang stalking is to make you look mentally ill. Okay, we talked about some weird things on the live stream last night, and just everything that you are dealing with is designed to make you look nuts. Period. All of it. Every single thing that the targeted individual is dealing with, we are the crazy people. We are them. We are the ones who are getting persecuted and harassed and jerked around. And it's like we're their little playthings, man. There's nothing we could do about it. And some people flip out and they go over the edge and start shooting people or whatever, and or they get incarcerated or they attack someone, or have a mental breakdown. And I can see why. I mean, I've been there. I mean, I used to drink a lot of alcohol, and it seemed like the only thing I could do to keep from just taking some of these people out. you know, I mean, I'm just being honest. Like I said, when I came on to do this live stream, like I said, I've been dealing with a lot of things today, and some of the things that I've been thinking about are kind of depressing, and I'm just kind of pouring it out. But I'm telling you the truth. I'm being honest about this. I would say that definitely later these people are going to have to answer, but you have to remember what's going on. You have to remember where you are, and that's important. And when you get into the spiritual application of this, it's crucial. Okay, think about that for a minute. If you're just going to look at this as a bunch of government hive mind stuff where people are all being controlled, by these frequencies or whatever, and it doesn't explain the dynamic that you're really dealing with. That there's people that have sold out to the kingdom of Satan, and that's basically their job. They're laughing at us. We're the unfortunates, you know. And people talk about how it puts a spring in their step when they see these stalkers. Yeah, because they feel like they made the right choice when they see you being persecuted, being driven insane, and discredited, and harassed, and beaten down, and well, yeah, they they're pretty sure they made the right choice at that point. Okay, but everybody's going to change their mind later. Dave said the targeted individual gets the last laugh. Well, God's going to get the last word. Whether or not I make whether or not I make it through this, I know He's going to deal with everybody. You know, and you're supposed to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I can hope, I can pray, and so on and so forth. But this stuff is crazy. I believe that targeted individuals who ask God for help have a lot of things going for them. Okay. But, at the end of the day, we're outnumbered. And you got to look at this for what it is. As far as talking about it, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm going to make videos for you guys, and I want people to know what's going on, and to be aware of the tactics and the motives of gang stalking and how it works. But I would never just go out on a street corner and start trying to convince people walking by the targeted individuals are a legitimate. I wouldn't waste my time. I know who's out there. They are out there. And the other people don't have a clue what the hell's going on. They're dumber than a box of rocks. They have no idea where the hell they are, let alone what's happening to you. And even if they did, they would probably join them because they would be scared, scare the hell out of them. That's really what we're dealing with. This is not just a little, game that you play on the weekend, man. This is really scary. This whole thing about being a targeted individual is a literal nightmare, man. It's like living in hell. Okay, it is. You're alone. You're getting attacked. You don't know what's going to happen next. People are, trying to poison you, break into your house, spread rumors about you, attacking your personal property. So you're attacking you with energy weapons. You got demons messing with you. I mean, it's like a Stephen King novel. Okay, this isn't just a trial that you're walking through, or a dark night of the soul. This is like walking through hell, literally. I'm not going to make it any more complicated than it already is. I know what I'm dealing with. Let me go back into the comments. Well, Lord be a lamp unto my feet says, evil persists because good men do nothing. Yeah, that's not a Bible verse. I think that was Benjamin Franklin, wasn't it? Um, but you got to remember, for example, with Paul, he wasn't out trying to straighten out the Roman government that was persecuting Christians and throwing them into the games where they were being devoured by animals and everything. In fact, that was part of what he was talking about was deterring people from trying to protest against the government. Eventually, they got blamed for, I think, some fires in Rome, and that's when Peter was crucified. Um, but anyway, I mean, a lot of people. That's the problem when people get on the government bandwagon. And I apologize if you disagree with me, but you have to realize where you are. This is way bigger than the government, man. The government is involved. The secret societies are involved. The occult can be involved, but they're just little tentacles on the menagerie that you're dealing with. They're just little puppets. Okay, that's it. This is bigger than that. People are being processed. People are, like I said, being plagued with certain things. And for targeted individuals, that's your cross. That's what you're here to bear. That's the life that you're going to live. Some people have other afflictions, and targeted individuals have to deal with this demonic hive, and they're going to be pushed down. They're going to have to deal with oppression. That's all there is to it. And it's at the root. It's demonic. It's spiritual. And this whole world is being controlled by the demonic forces that I'm talking about. And when people focus on the government, they're missing the point. So much bigger than that. So much bigger than that. When people are writing their senator or whatever, he doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And if he did know, he would just laugh and say, "Well, yeah, well, you don't know what we're up against." There are a lot of people, and I've heard their philosophy. We get this world and you guys missed out. I don't know how many times people come up to me and say these things. You missed out. You really did. You could have had this plan. And you're probably gonna go to hell anyway. And they'll just really ramp you down. And it's like, man, whoa. And so they believe in the spiritual stuff because otherwise they would just deny that. And then you get the people that, oh, I don't believe any of that. But you see them saying other things. This place is ruled by principalities and powers by the kingdom of Satan. That's what you're dealing with. Okay, it's not just a government. People think that they can solve the ills of the world with political, you know, reform. You're going to come close to it, man. You could send a zillion people to war to die. This place is not going to get fixed until Christ returns, man. Bigger, bigger than that. Huge. Huge problem. And, God has gone to great lengths to prove that to people, right? I mean, look at all the kingdoms after the Tower of Babel, and we're right at the end, in my opinion. And it's not the contingency that is talked about in the Bible starts out with Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Ottoman Empire, up to the modern day. And if you look at the tower in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, starting out with Babylon, okay, Christ returns and destroys the statue simultaneously. Why? Why would that statue starting out with Babylon be destroyed simultaneously? Because it's a contingency. That's why. Okay, all the kingdoms are just heads. They are manifestations of the same thing. Okay, and it's going to be around until Jesus returns. Period. That's it. Does that mean that you can't do, good or try to, do something? Well, you can do what I'm doing. You try to help other people. You can be kind to targeted individuals. You can give them hope and support and so on and so forth. But it's not just the government. That's why I get so frustrated when it comes to that, man. And people are complicating their scenario. I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to show them what's going on, and these people are laughing. And, oh no, you got to watch this video. Here's how it's happening to me. Here's what's happening to me, and they've got my DNA, and the reason that you can't feel the energy waves that are coming at me is because they have my DNA, and they're just looking at you like you're completely out of your mind, and they don't care about the video, and the other people that know about it are laughing because they know what's going on. And it's not to say that the government's not working on that stuff. It's that you got to wake up, man. This is way bigger than that. Way bigger than that. I mean, it's horrifically bigger than that. And people need to realize the spiritual application to this whole thing, and they got to realize what they're up against. It's so much bigger than the government, man. And that's why when targets leave the United States, they can't get away from it. There's people that have left the United States. They can't escape. There is no getting away from the demonic hive. There isn't. I was listening to somebody else talk about this. In fact, I got some comments from Josh Waz. He was talking about how he moved 7 different times, and it was all like a waste of time. People run. You can run, but you can't hide. You got to deal with this stuff. I understand. I mean, I get it, but yeah, you got to really understand what you're up against here. Let's go back into the comments. God pointed me to scriptures about what is happening, and I think that it's part of prophecy. It's about Babylon. Okay, well, that's the Lord be a lamp unto my feet. Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. You have mystery Babylon, right? And so a lot of people will believe that the Antichrist is coming out of Rome. But of course, John the Revelator said or was told, and if I haven't got the scripture right now, I could put that up later. Um, it once was, now is not, it is yet to come. Well, now is not would prove that it's not Rome because that happened during the rule of the Roman Empire, right? So Mystery Babylon talks, really when you get into that starts out with Babylon. Mystery Babylon is a part of that contingency, right? And what is it? It's the kingdom of Satan on the earth, right? People living their own way without God. It's not going to work, right? Refusing to submit to God. And that contingency is not going to be destroyed until he returns. That's interesting. You'd say that, Lord, be a lamp on my feet. And let's get into some other things here. Okay, let's see what's going on. Well, my voice matter says, and explain to me how you're not giving them any hope by your discouragement and demoralization tonight is allegedly. I'm not trying to demoralize anybody. I'm just trying to let people know what they're up against so they can be realistic. If you want someone to tell you what you want to hear, go somewhere else. I'm telling you what it is. If you want to go to one of those other channels where people are sitting around telling you that there's a lawsuit and the government's going to get sued and all that stuff, and they're taking names and they're going to come experiment on you, go there. Okay. Because that's not going to happen. When you're dealing with this disinformation that's out there, indoctrinating the minds of people who are already being harassed is not helping them. And when they're standing out on the street corner trying to tell people all about what's happening to targeted individuals and getting laughed at by the demonic hive mind and getting called out you know, told that they're crazy and being incarcerated, is that helping them? No, it's not. And I'm sorry if it sounds discouraging. I'm just telling you the truth. And if you know if it sounds negative, I apologize. I'm just being honest. I've been dealing with this for a long time, and if you're not realistic about what's happening, you're eventually going to run into it. Okay, if you don't like that, I'm sorry, but that's where we are. But anyway, I mean, I'm not trying to be abrasive. My voice matters also. But what do you suggest the plan of attack would be for targeted individuals realistically and what they're up against? Do you believe it's just the government, or do you believe in the spiritual explanation? Well, that's an interesting comment. On average, Joe, because when they were requiring people to show their faces, I thought that was real interesting too. Now, a lot of people would say, "Well, that's just for that's just to keep everybody on the level." Well, I don't know. I don't know, man. I personally would back off of a lot of that. And like I said, I don't agree with a lot of the information that's out there. I don't agree with looking at this as a government run thing solely. I believe the government's doing stuff like that. I believe all of that. But it's just a small part of this whole thing. And unfortunately, I see a lot of testimonies by people who have just been indoctrinated to the point where they have no idea what they're dealing with. And they're like I said, they're being laughed at. They're being laughed at. They believe all these things are just nothing but technology. They have no idea what they're up against. They have zero clue of what's going on, and they're not drawing near to God. They're not looking in the right place. They're just out on a fringe. And if I was one of those people and just, oh yeah, here, tell me this, tell me that, it's okay. Go ahead and believe whatever you want. Well, am I loving them? Do I really care about people if I'm just letting them just go off on a fringe and just believe a bunch of stuff that doesn't add up? Well, no, of course not. Right? What happens to targeted individuals? Well, they're oppressed, they're demoralized, they get driven crazy, they get indoctrinated, discredited, and driven crazy. I mean, it's just what happens to them, right? And a lot of the things that's coming out of a lot of channels that are out there that are just talking about this stuff as nothing but technology. It's bullshit. Okay, along with the lawsuits and everything else, and it really pisses me off. I'm sorry, but I'm just telling you the truth. There's a lot more to this than that. Yeah, there's technology involved. People are dealing with energy weapons, V2K, you bet. But it's way more than that. Way more. This is way bigger than that. Okay? Way bigger. Well, I don't know what you're getting at. My voice matters when you say some seeds will fall into the good soil. Jesus and the mustard seed parable. Okay. Well, when he was talking about if you have the faith of a mustard seed, that was a reference to people who did not have any faith at all. And when you're talking about the parable of the sower, when some seeds will fall on good soil, well, that I don't know how that relates to anything, but because if you're going to look at that whole thing, the parable of the sower, you break up the fallow ground of your heart with the word of God. you spend time with a gardener, you cultivate a relationship, your roots go down deep, and you can handle persecution. That's the interpretation of the parable of the sower, because of the seeds that fall on the rocky ground. Those are people who are shallow. They don't look into the word of God. They don't understand it. People who get choked out by the thorns are people who are running after all the things in the world. And the good soil are people who spend time with the gardener, break up the fallow ground of their heart, grow their roots deep, and handle persecution. So you can't just throw everything into a targeted individual. You know, there's a way that makes sense. I'm just reading the one that's the most recent. But if you want to argue with me, that's fine. I don't know why you're coming after me. Did I say something that that made you angry? I can't read all your comments. By the way, I'm not your problem. So get over it. Well, Gabby King says, you don't believe it's just technology? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Now, you have to remember, though, that technology comes from the spiritual dimension, right? And so, it depends on how you look at it. But no, I believe that people are being attacked demonically. Absolutely. Absolutely. When you're dealing with people who are being influenced to attack targeted individuals, are you really gonna say that it's some supercomputer somewhere and they've gotten a hold of some DNA out of your garbage can, and that's how they know all these things, and they can read your mind. They know your favorite flavor of ice cream. They can put dreams in your mind and control people and all these things. All these people are being controlled by a supercomputer, and that's how it's all working. Well, why, if the government had all that power, they would have control over everything right now. They wouldn't need to do all these stupid things that they're doing, right? There wouldn't be all the disorder in the world right now if they had the power to control people that way. Why, they would already have control, right? Interesting how that obfuscates the spiritual reality of our scenario, though. And now we have people focusing on technology solely rather than drawing near to God and asking Him for help. And of course, well, that's not a solution. Okay, well, Lord be a lamp unto my feet says, "What do you think about synchronicities?" That's a good question, and that's another angle that we're going to take a look at now, because it goes into what we're talking about actually. And I've mentioned that before. When you were dealing with this, looking at it from the salient landscape of a spiritual foundation, you were looking at a lot of things. Okay, so there's different themes that come at targets. We've talked about those, but we've also talked about the foreshadow and how targets get comments and so on and so forth long before the overt aggressive harassment begins. Okay, and um, how is that possible? Well, there's a plan. There is a plan. And when you get into the biblical stuff, and I've mentioned several examples before, especially when you get into Paul and Silas in Philippi, for example, they cast the demon out, or unclean spirit, or spirit of divination, or she was a soothsayer. They cast the spirit out of her up in Philippi, and she was telling the future. Okay, she was making a lot of money up there, and she was like a prophetess. Okay, that's why they ended up in prison. Okay, what's up with that? What about all those things that you look at in the Bible? You might look at different examples similar to that, or you look at the biblical prophecy, for example. Okay, or you get into Dr. Michael Heiser's work, and you look into things like the divine council. Okay. I mean, think about Daniel. He got prophecy about stuff we're dealing with now, way back in Babylon, right? Interesting, right? Well, what's going on there? Well, obviously, there's knowledge of future events. Okay, how does all that work? Well, we don't know. We don't have all of it. We could speculate. We could come up with different, ideas about that. Maybe God, knows all those things, or maybe He has a dimensional perspective that involves, something outside of space time, or whatever. We don't know. Okay, but we know that there is the knowledge there. And when you're dealing with, individuals who are being harassed, and you have to assume at that point that there's demonic forces involved in that. Like I said, there's a spiritual foundation. Well, what do they have? They have that information, however they get that. Okay, and we're talking about way in advance. And what does that mean? They have a plan for your life. They are setting you up. Everybody in the world fits into their menagerie in some place, which gets back to what I was talking about earlier. That targeted individuals fit in that place in the world where they're the crazies. Oh, those people are just nuts. You know, and of course, we legitimize psychiatry and some of the other agendas that are out there to indoctrinate people. And then you have the invasion of psychiatry into your physician's office, and kids being drugged up and labeled while they're in school because they can't sit in their desk. And now everybody's got a bunch of mental disorders. And you have all this horrible stuff going on where it's literally killing people. And you have an altered genome because of all the chemical methylation that you have going on from all these drugs. Not only that, but they get into the water supply, and it's horrible. Okay, but you fit into that menagerie. Okay, that's where targets are. They're the people that are being driven nuts. Okay, they have a plan. And it's different from a lot of the people that are out there. You're a minority, but they begin that. A lot of times targets will say that they're set up even when they're kids. Okay, but what's the point? The point is that they are in control of this place. And whether you're somebody that's dealing with the government, or whether you're someone who's dealing with the occult or whatever, it's the same thing. And it's all part of their plan, and they set this stuff up. When it comes to synchronicities, where targets are having dreams and things are happening, they're having deja vu, or they're running into things, and it all follows these different themes, or they're dealing with controlled programming. They think the damn radio is talking to them, or the commercials on the television, or whatever. It's all the same. It's all part of the plan, and they have set the whole thing up. It's not a supercomputer. It's not DNA resonance frequency that's accomplishing all those things. It's them. And they've been ruling this world for a long time. Okay? That's what I would say about that's really the only thing that makes sense. Now the other explanation follows into the invasion into the mind of the targeted individual. Okay? To where they start looking for this stuff. And the themes are already there. Okay, a lot of the stuff that's out there, um, you just didn't notice it before, and then you see targets noticing different color sequences or number sequences or phrases, or innuendos or whatever, things that are in the philosophical genre of society, and now it means something to them, and they're noticing all these things. They've been sensitized, they've been critiqued, there's associations in their mind, and it's kind of a mechanism that has been activated, and now they see it, and they're just processing information differently. Targeted individuals are attacked in so many different ways, and their mind is critiqued in a way that they are processing information in a personal way. They're taking it all in, because that's the invasion into the mind of the target. So there's different ways that this stuff could work out. Not only is it a setup, but it's also a way that people process information, where they start seeing all these things. Let me get back into the comments. Oh, that's a good one. At Average Joe says, well, how do you explain what I experienced where I prayed specific prayers and was able to drive away my harasser? The perp had to be telepathic to hear what I was saying, doors closed and everything, right? Well, that's a good point because that's a real good illusion possibly. And if you're dealing with something that involves the spiritual dimension, like I said earlier, and you're praying, and there's also the element that there's a dimensional perspective involved in these things, just like that lady in Philippi knew who Paul was, right, and also knew how to forecast events in that area, so much so that she made a lot of money for her masters and was famous as being a soothsayer or a prophetess. Well, how did she know those things? How do all the real psychics and stuff like that know what's happened? Because they're in complete contact with the spiritual dimension and they have that knowledge. They knew you were going to pray that prayer because they had the information. When targeted individuals take off running because they're being harassed by the demonic hive mind that is after them, and they go somewhere and the people are waiting already for them when they get there, how do you think that works? Same way, right? They already know. Okay. What about the incidents where people, you know, they're tearing apart their houses looking for technology and there's nothing there? But somehow people know what's happening in there. Well, it's the same thing. It's not always that people have cameras in your house or are using technology. Sometimes that can happen. But sometimes it's just simply information from the spiritual dimension. And that's why it's important to realize this stuff. It's very important to see how this is working because there's a lot of illusions. Then at that point, just like the question that we got, you know, what are you gonna come to? You're gonna believe people are reading your mind then, right? That's one of their best tricks, right? Now what's gonna happen to the target? Well, you can't even think now. Not only do you believe people are watching you do everything in your house, now you can't even have a thought in your mind without all these people, all these, the hive knowing they're watching you all the time. That's the proposition that forms in the mind of the target. Is that true? I don't believe it is. I don't believe it's true. I believe it's partly there's some of that stuff that's going on as far as the information that they have. It makes it look that way, but I don't believe that's what it is. And what happens? The target becomes ultra paranoid. And you can be attacked in a way where you can be in a room and they can start pulling those things off and you can feel trapped and you can feel like everyone is reading your mind. You can start, having a panic attack and then you become agoraphobic and you don't even want to go out into public anymore. And it's all an illusion. It's all there to box you in, to make you paranoid and eventually even get you into the place where you are, scrutinizing your own thoughts. Because of course you got to monitor everything because you don't want to, if you just have a random ridiculous thought come out of your mind, well, everybody knows now, you know, that's what they want. That's what they want you to believe. And then you're your own worst enemy. Classic gang stalking, classic false proposition. And they know how to propagate those lies. And that's how they do it. Neurodivergent says they're trying their best to control, but we could take the power back by not reacting. I would totally agree. That's very powerful advice, and it's something that I've learned the hard way. I've made all the mistakes, you know, and you get trapped, you get called out. You forget that dealing with this demonic hive mind, dealing with all these perps. You can't expect logic. You can't expect these people to treat you, the way that they should be treating you with respect and dignity, logically. And they're going to come and attack you. It's going to be unorthodox. It's going to be rude. It'll be illegal. It'll be downright hostile. And if you let that offend you, if you let that trigger your emotions, well, it's not going to go well for you. Things are going to go out of whack because you are reacting, just like neurodivergent is talking about, just like I've said many times in the past, and I've fallen for that, and it gets me because I'm human and I make mistakes. Very powerful advice. On average, Joe says overtly since 2020, but in hindsight, when I think about all my odd experiences, it's been happening since 2000. Now that's an interesting comment because that's kind of what I was talking about before when I was asking people to try to remember some of the things in their past that they could connect, with very strict criteria to the things that they were experiencing overtly, as an average Joe was talking about, because there's usually a buildup. There's usually evidence that this stuff was there all along. And I talk about that when I deal with targets, is that it's not like the world just metamorphosized. I mean, this stuff has been around, right? It was there before you were, aware of it. It was all around you. You were just like one of those people in the group where they just don't know where the hell they are. They don't know what's going on. They don't know that they are surrounded by all these things. They're completely blind, rose colored glasses. Yeah, they do. They track the phone. There's a lot of, there's a mixture that's going on for targets. People are dealing with phone hacking. They're dealing with technology. They're dealing with all that kind of stuff. They're dealing with direct energy weapons. They're dealing with people. They're dealing with injustice all over the place. But people are being manipulated spiritually. Let's see what else we have here. Camby King says overtly March 2020, I can trace it back to my birth. My parents talked about me having a red and white orb over my crib. Interesting. That's pretty trippy. And a lot of people talk about the fact that they remember things going all the way back when they were little kids. That's not something that's uncommon. And that goes right into what I'm talking about. They have a plan, and they knew what they were going to do to you. They have a menagerie, and they have an illusion to spin, and they know how to do that. I've referenced the fact that you're dealing with beings that we don't even understand. They're super intelligent. They have information that we don't even know about. They could be sitting right next to us and we can't even see them. I mean, this is beyond, and it sounds crazy, but it's true. I don't know how to explain the dimensional stuff that goes on and how all that works, but I just know it's there. And it's something uh, that involves a plan, and they know. And targeted individuals are painted as crazy. You get into a lot of diagnosis, or criteria that would diagnose targeted individuals, and a lot of them are diagnosed with factitious disorder depending on their dysfunction. And some of the targets out there get hit so hard with this stuff they don't know what's happening, that they just they become so dysfunctional that no one would ever believe any of the stuff that they say, and they get into the disinformation, and it just their whole story just it gets muddled up, but it's still true. Okay, the things that they are telling people are true, but then they get diagnosed with factitious disorder or schizophrenia, and they just don't know how to break this stuff up. You know, it's like what I was talking about earlier when you get someone who has watched videos about the DNA resonance frequency. I'm not saying that you can't look at that stuff, but you got to be careful how much of it you think is fact. Because then what happens? They become emboldened and they say, oh, look, here's what's happening. And people just look at them like they're whacked out. Okay. Because if it was true, if they could really do all that, there would obviously, be a little bit more consistency with what you're dealing with in the world. They're working on it. There's no way they have all that. And when targets are getting harassed, they are dealing with the demonic hive, and there's a plan. They have foreknowledge, they have a plan, and they are controlling the world. They are masters of destiny, man. And when God saves people, He saves them out of their plan. You know, it's wild. Okay, taking a look at the comments here. Yeah, Lynn Bomber says we're human. How can we not react? I'm not trying to. Yeah, that's a good point. You are. You're only human, and that goes into forgiving yourself on this stuff because they will try to gaslight you. They will accuse you. A lot of the stuff that targeted individuals deal with is just accusation, gaslighting. Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, look at yourself. Oh, you're crabby. Oh, you're this, you're that. And you're just trying to hang on for dear life. All the stuff you're dealing with, of course, you're going to be emotional. Of course, you're going to be exhausted. Of course, you're going to be angry and frustrated. Of course, right? You're only human. Absolutely. But you have to remember the agenda and you have to try to cancel it out if possible. Well, let's take a look. Neurodivergent again. It all started when I had just gotten pregnant with my third child. I didn't realize something was wrong, though. I just thought some people didn't like me, and it took a couple of years before things got bad. Yeah. So you're like a lot of people. You were just trying to figure out what everybody's problem was. You knew something was up, but of course, as a normal human being who has not been conditioned or sensitized to all these things, you didn't know what was up. You just thought, there was something going on you couldn't figure out. That's very common with targets. They don't know. They're just like, what? Why is everybody acting so strange? Why am I getting this negative attention? Is there something? Then of course they're trying to figure out if it's something that they're doing or whatever. But no, no, that's not what's going on. All right, let's see what's going on here. I'm trying to kind of skim through these comments. Okay, Asa Cowherd says, looking back in my life, people didn't used to be psychic. At least that was my experience. You, you didn't think anybody was reading your mind before, huh? It was a new experience when you got hit with all this weird stuff. I'm assuming that's what you're getting at. But yeah, yeah, and a lot of targets. In fact, I've dealt with that stuff. It took me a while to figure out. I just finally got to the point where I didn't care. Okay, whether 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 targets are worried about somebody watching them in the privacy of their own home, or whether they are worried about somebody reading their mind or something like that. I mean, it's really creepy, but you're really no different from anyone else. And if somebody's really that hell bent on watching you, you know, they're the ones that should be embarrassed. That's the way I look at it. You just gotta you not that I'm saying you gotta turn into an exhibitionist or something, but you just gotta get to that point where you don't care. Okay. Well, we've got some interesting stuff out there. I'm trying to get in here and pick something out. Okay, we got a dialogue going. There's nothing wrong with that. Nicholas Boserman, sorry I didn't see you out there. I did not look into that. I've been really busy. I've been working every day. I'm gonna look into that though. You wouldn't believe the stuff I'm dealing with, and like I said, today was one of those days. So I've been busy, and I've been dealing with other things that I'm not even going to talk about on the channel because I think a lot of times in fact that's another thing that I'll illustrate that a lot of times targets can be attacked, and communicating these things is not always a good idea. Sometimes you just have to pretend like it's not affecting you and just keep moving and put it into something productive. But rest assured, people, I'm dealing with a lot right now. And I apologize if some of that came out in the live stream tonight. Um, I'm burdened, man. I've got a lot on my shoulders right now, period. And it's intense. That's all I'm going to say. Well, let's see here. Anybody else have anything to interject? We've had the synchronicity comment. That was productive. Anybody have any other topics that we can build on? Well, it looks like maybe we're at that time where we're going to have to end the live stream. I got to get up and go to work as usual, and it's been about an hour. I'm gonna keep it open for a little bit longer to see if anything happens. Okay, we've got a few things going on. Build on a solution. Well, you have to be careful of that. And I know are you a new targeted individual? Umar Abdul Jalil, if I pronounce that, or how long have you been targeted? Because when people start talking about solutions, they're usually new targeted individuals and they're usually unaware of what's really happening. And I think I've talked about that in the sense that until Christ returns, the kingdom of Satan, the kingdom of darkness, is going to be ruling the planet. And that's what you're dealing with ultimately. Okay. And a lot of times targets will be pushed in an area where I've talked about this before, developing protocols and just letting things be the way they are, being in control of your environment in the sense that you're focused on things that you have control over. Okay, that would be a good solution. In other words, work. Try to get your financial life in order. If someone is attacking you or whatever, if there's a way to deter them without being called out or jeopardizing your scenario, you can do that. Making yourself safe, trying not to grind metal or worry about these things. And that includes trying to solve all these things. Okay. Because when targeted individuals are focused on solving things, they can be driven crazy that way too, because you cannot control other people and you are faced with a very difficult scenario in the sense that you are being bullied. Okay. You are dealing with, if you're a classic targeted individual who's dealing with higher forms of harassment, this is beyond your ability to keep up with as far as resources are involved. Okay. Now, you can ask God to help you and he can come into your scenario and give you strength and so on and so forth. But you're not going to be able to control other people. And if you're focused on, solving something, it's like those other channels that I'm talking about. We're going to get together and get a lawsuit, or you know what? That's those are pipe dreams. You got to be realistic in your scenario. A lot of people like to chase after that stuff. It makes them feel good, but it's just like junk food. It's only going to last for a while, and it's going to leave you tired and worn out. Be realistic. You got to be realistic. Well, let's see here. What is the end game? The end game. This is the end game. And just doing what you can do every day, doing what you're supposed to be doing, living like a good citizen, not giving anyone any opportunity or reason to, move into your life and gain, I don't know, any leverage in your scenario. Because as a targeted individual, they want to do that. I've talked about the fact that anytime they have something that you need, or they have control over a situation that you have to, solve something or do something, like work environment kind of scenarios, that's where things get really sticky, you know. And if you're out there on the fringe of society, like some people, and just trying to, I don't know, do your own thing or whatever, in a sense where you don't really care about what anyone thinks, you're buying into their strategy, because they will get you that way, because targets will become jaded. And I've talked about that before. There was a guy up in Washington that, he was getting harassed and attacked. And he's like, there's nothing I can do. I don't even care anymore. I'm just going to get drunk and the hell with the world. And this dude starts drinking malt liquor and, yelling out his windows, smoking cigars. And the people that knew what was going on, they knew, but they're laughing because all the people around this guy were starting to, just played right into their strategy. Oh, it's the crazy guy. All right. Well, look, he's nuts. He's drunk. Oh my gosh, and it didn't work out. And you want to try and live your life, to the letter of the law if possible. You want to be a good citizen. You want to try and work, you know, as far as the end game, they want to drive you nuts. They want to exhaust you. They want to get you into an emotional state that you just go nuts and basically explode or implode. And that's why when neurodivergent said, focus on not reacting, that's powerful. And you have to see the motive that getting you in those emotional states, or getting you in a scenario where you're trying to accomplish something or solve something that is out of your control, is just going to work against you. That's always what happens. On average, Joe, you crack me up. Well, guys, like I said, I've got a lot of work to do, and I apologize if I seemed negative in the beginning of the live stream. Like I said, I've been dealing with a lot of pressure, and I'll go back and look at it. If it's too negative, maybe I'll just erase the upload. And sometimes I do that for other reasons as well. But I appreciate everybody showing up. Hopefully, you'll all have a good weekend, and we'll try to continue doing these things every night, and discussing our experiences as targeted individuals. I'd like to thank everyone who helps support the channel. The description, the link is always in the description. Be good to yourselves, and God bless.